Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast. Gotta get it hype. Crypto is what we like, but this is not investment or financial advice. Gotta do your research, cause it's risky. We know it is. This show is educational and it's informative. Crypto's the future, really, it ain't no debate.
I have a really interesting interview here. This is a brand new tool that's being developed for the Cardano ecosystem. It's Atlas, and this is a Plutus application backend to help developers build better dApps in the Cardano ecosystem. I have a really star-studded list of guests here joining me on this episode to talk all about it. They collaborated to work on it and make this all a possibility. We have Chase from M Labs. We have from Plank, Manu Gunther and Ale Gardia. And from Genius Yield, we have Lars Brunej and Marvin Burton. So I would love to get a little introduction from everyone so we all know who we're talking to. And I would love to actually pick your brains and find out what you've all been working on. So let's start from the top of the list. Chase, can we get a little introduction from yourself and how you're involved in the ecosystem?
Yeah, for sure. So I joined M Labs at around the end of 2020, have been working with Haskell for about a year longer than that. Ever since joining M Labs, I've mostly been working on basically ecosystem tools. So I started working with Plutarch, which is an EDSL for generating Plutus core. We initially developed it because to fill the needs of developers that needed efficient Plutus core. Then I moved on to different PABs and eventually ended up working with Genius Yield to work on Atlas. And yeah, in general, I've just been working on several different tooling in the Cardano ecosystem, and it's been pretty fun.
All right. And you mentioned a couple of extra PABs there. You said you worked on a couple of PABs. We'll dive into that again a little bit later. But that's pretty interesting. And what about Manu and Ale there? What have you guys been working on?
Yeah, thanks. Well, we are Manu and Ale from Plank. We are based in Argentina. And well, basically, the two of us first working Haskell for a long, long time, all our PhD and all that, more than 10 years. And we jumped into the Cardano ecosystem in mid-21, more or less. From that moment, we worked on dApps development. We worked for several known projects in the ecosystem, like the Charlie Tree Oracle, the Bi-Fi, the DEX, and others. And we were working in some tooling too, maybe the original IOG PAB. And we collaborated there first with some improvements, like connection with other blockchain queries and all that. For example, we built a tutorial for developing Cardano using the PAB. And well, a couple of months ago, the last year, we met Marvin in Buenos Aires in the first hackathon of Cardano in Latin America. Well, we went with a team of developers that we have here in Cordoba, Argentina. And after that meeting, well, we started a formal collaboration, and we participated in the final part of the Atlas development. So we are really happy to this moment that we have this important tool for Cardano, and another Haskell Plutus application backend. So that's really great. I don't know if you want to add something.
No. I was going to add that we met Lars.
Lars too. Sorry, Lars. sorry for that. Yeah, we met both of you.
I do remember the photos from that event, and it looked pretty good. It's nice to have those type of events all around the world, so people can attend to them and meet face to face, and these collaborations happen. That's absolutely brilliant. All right, and the last two here, Marvin and Lars, yourself. A lot of people do know you from the Genius Yield project, but please give us a quick introduction and maybe what else in the background you guys been working on.
Yeah, so as people know, I work with Lars at Genius Yield, building a lot of all the applications from the Launchpad, the token cell, the DEX. And we've been working really hard on this Atlas framework that really streamlines the process of building transactions and interacting with smart contract. And it's basically a key foundational piece that powers all our application at Genius Yield. And we're very proud to make that core piece available to the public, to the community, for others to be able to make it easier, to lower the barrier to entry, to build on Cardano, and to really kind of accelerate the development of dApps for everyone on Cardano. I really think that's a key piece of infrastructure. Another project that I work on is called Maestro. So Maestro is a blockchain infrastructure provider, and it's building things like high performance blockchain indexes, a transaction managers that are able to notify you of when your transactions are on chain or rolled back, and is one of the data providers of actually Atlas. So Atlas in itself is a library, it's a framework, but it still needs to interface with the network, with the blockchain. And to interface, it needs to be able to query reliably on-chain data that is both correct and real-time, and then be able to submit those transactions. And so to do that, Atlas needs to be combined with a data provider. And that is exactly what Maestro is. So Maestro is kind of the second piece that makes Atlas kind of be able to execute in the blockchain. Is it gives it the on-chain data that it needs, and it allows it to submit transactions. So actually today, with the release of Atlas, we're also releasing the Maestro platform that allows you to create an account and then be able to get access to the data, so you don't have to like run your own node, for example. And so this is a good example of how different projects that we're working on are really complementary and really help the ecosystem as a whole, make it easier to build on Cardano and grow the ecosystem.
And Lars, final introduction.
So yeah, I'm based in Germany, and I think first learned Haskell more than 20 years ago now, I think 2001 or 2002, during my PhD or my postdoc at Cambridge University. But I only started doing it professionally, I think in 2016, when I joined IOHK back then. Now it's called IOG, the company that builds Cardano. And actually, I joined as a Haskell developer and then went into education, taught a lot of Haskell. And then for the last 2 years now, I've been teaching Plutus. And in order to teach it, I had to, obviously understand it and become quite good at it. So then I joined Genius Yield 1.5 years ago, I think, by now. And basically, I mostly worked on the smart contracts for DEX and staking, token sale, and so on, but also on the early stages of the framework, because I wanted to try out the smart contract, so I needed to interact with transactions and construct them, query the blockchain, and so on, and wasn't happy with the IOHK PAB, so basically started writing our own thing, which was basically the beginnings of the Atlas framework. So in order to work on our DEX and our other tools and technologies, we needed something like that. So that's how Atlas started. And yes, and since then, we have constantly working on it, and I'm very pleased that now finally it's in a state where we can release it open source.
Absolutely brilliant. It's a really nice convergence of everyone's skills and everything that's being built in the Cardano ecosystem at the moment. Now, Chase, a little bit earlier, you mentioned other PABs that you have worked on. So obviously, IOG last year about this time were promising a PAB, but we never saw anything of it. I'm assuming this is completely different from that and an evolution from it. Does anyone have any insights into all these other PABs?
I can give a little bit of insight on other PABs, not too much on IOG's own PAB, but so for the other PABs, I've worked on Lucid, I've worked on a little bit of CTL, I've worked on bot Plutus interface and Plutip, and really the fundamental issue with a lot of these PABs is that the ones which were written in Haskell don't work too well, and the ones which are not written in Haskell aren't written in Haskell. So they have other problems such as interop with Plutus and so on and so forth, such as Lucid. Lucid is very good as a front-end PAB, but then because it doesn't have that Haskell interop, it becomes very hard to apply parameters to scripts and interact with scripts and so on and so forth. CTL suffers kind of from the same problem. It took a lot of time. Oh, CTL stands for Cardano Transaction Library, by the way. It also took a lot of time to mature and really make it easy for developers to actually use it. And the Haskell PABs that existed, such as bot Plutus interface and Plutip, the issue with those was that they mostly treated Plutus apps as its primary citizen. So they wrapped around Plutus apps, and that kind of resulted in this really bad dilemma where Plutus apps was always just outdated and you could never really have any updated features. Atlas just skips around all of that by interfacing with the Cardano API directly. And that's really why I think it's the only Haskell PAB that is actually really like usable and really easy to use, just really productive and so on.
Gotcha. Okay, that's really interesting. I hadn't realized that there was so many other PABs or interfaces being built in the Cardano ecosystem. So we have all of these different tools out there. How would we get developers and whatnot to not so much agree to use one single PAB, but move forward to one more cohesive ecosystem, so that we're not spreading ourselves thin or on all different PABs being built. It just seems like a waste of resources and efforts, building all these different flavors.
I think there are two aspects to that. I mean, on the one hand, I think it's not a bad thing if there are alternatives. I mean, you have that situation in a lot of places. I mean, there's not just one, whatever, web library for Haskell, for example, or web server library, or not just one library to access, to talk to an SQL database. So there are some lightweight ones and some very strongly typed ones. And I think that's a good thing, because then people can choose what suits best to their needs. But then, of course, the other reason might be that there is nothing and everybody has to do its own thing in order to get anything done at all. And that, of course, is a bad situation. And I think that was the situation we were in like a year ago or so, where the IOG pub just didn't work. And every project that wanted to build anything on Cardano had to reinvent the wheel and do it over and over again. And I hope that that is now, hopefully, also with Atlas fixed. I mean, I don't think that these other things like Lucid or so will go away, and that they don't have to. I mean, some people prefer to use TypeScript or Rust or whatever. But I mean, it's not bad if people have a choice. But at least now people are not forced anymore to do their own thing, and there is something they can use off the shelf, basically.
That's really cool, and we are seeing a lot of alternative languages being used to write Plutus scripts and dApps in general. So we're seeing the rise of like a Plutus, Aiken, Helios, and Option in the Cardano ecosystem. I think Aiken is like extremely popular at the moment. A lot of dApps are rewriting themselves into Aiken, for example, to start writing smart contracts into the Cardano ecosystem, building dApps. How do those specific languages, can they tie into what you guys have built?
Yes, I think so, because the point of the Atlas framework is mostly the off-chain, what we call off-chain code. So, there's on-chain and off-chain code. On-chain is the Plutus itself, the smart contracts. And then off-chain is interacting with the blockchain, querying the blockchain and constructing transaction, balancing transactions, and so on. And Atlas does that. So how you get to your on-chain code in the first place, whether you use Plutarch or Plutus TX or Icon or whatever, is a different story. So that's like orthogonal. So you can still use these other things to get to your smart contracts in the first place.
Okay, so we probably should talk about what all the things that Atlas can do, such as transaction building and whatnot. Can we get a list of everything so that people that are coming into and using Atlas for the first time understand what they can use it for?
At the moment, the framework has we understand it is allow you to, like, it could be thought that a replacement for the official pub, let's say, because again, as Lar was saying, you always can write your validator. I mean, the smart contract, the code that runs in the blockchain, using whatever you want. I mean, Plutus TX, Plutarch, the library you choose. And then the other interesting part is you need to build the transactions. And for building the transactions, you probably need to do a lot of things. Query the blockchain for some information, the constraints of a valid transaction, and well, basically, for me, Atlas is help you to write how a transaction should be built, and for doing that you need, like, you build like a basic transaction first, then you need to balance that transaction. For balancing that transaction, you need to run some algorithm for paying the fees of the transaction, and after that you need to submit and sign the transaction. Those are more or less the steps. And well, the Atlas language is able to do all that. In summary, it's like a querying the blockchain, build what we can call an unbalanced transaction, balance that transaction, submit it, and sign it. And of course, you can stop in the phase you want.
I would add, I mean, first of all, there's this provider, we call it providers. I think Lucid incidentally has something similar. So, I mean, there are lots of ways how you can interface with the blockchain. I mean, for example, you can run a local node and a local chain index, or you can use Blockfrost or Maestro, as Marvin described, and various combinations of these, or dbSync and so on. And we basically, in the Atlas framework, we abstract away from that. So we have something called provider, which has certain capabilities. For example, give me all UTXOs at an address, or submit this transaction. And then you can configure that. But when you program with Atlas, you don't have to worry about which provider you are using. So it's separated. So it's also easy then to swap out providers. So for example, what I personally do is when I try something out quickly, I use Maestro or Blockfrost. But of course, in production, maybe you don't want to rely on a third party and want to run your own infrastructure and use your own node. So you don't have to change the code for that. It's basically just a matter of configuration. So that's one thing. Then, I mean, we have like streamlined all the types. I mean, that's an issue I find in the Cardano ecosystem, because there's Chase mentioned the Cardano API, and then there's Plutus, of course, then there's Ledger, then there's, I mean, they're like different teams at IOG, and they all have their own types for similar things, like for pub keys or addresses, and it's all slightly different, and it's very annoying that you permanently have to convert them. So we basically have like our own set of types, and then conversions to all the IOG types. So that's also nice. So I mean, with Atlas, you can just work with like a consistent internally a consistent set of types, but you can also, if you want to, easily convert it back and forth to the IOG types. And then I would also add testing. So we integrate with Plutus Simple Model. That's another MLabs. It's a lightweight unit testing library. So it's very easy to write unit tests. So we beefed that up a little bit. I mean, Plutus Simple Model, I think, doesn't do a lot of checks regarding transaction fees, for example, or balancing, things like that. It concentrates more on validation of smart contracts. So we have enhanced it a little bit. So basically, so it's very faithful. So we use our actual production algorithm to construct a fully fledged transaction, and then we map that to this unit testing framework. So the test is actually quite meaningful. I mean, it also checks that the transaction building itself works. So that's easy to write unit tests. So we support that to easily write unit tests with this Plutus Simple Model. And we also have support for writing tests on a private test net. So it's relatively easy to spin up an actual blockchain that runs locally on your machine, and then, I mean, it's very close to reality. So it's quite a high level of confidence if those tests pass, that it will actually pass on the actual block, on the real blockchain. So we have support for that as well, plus some infrastructure stuff like logging, for example, which is also nice, I suppose.
Wow, it sounds like a fully fleshed out set of tools for developers, making it so much easier. That's brilliant, including all the unit tests that are being put in there as well. That just I think is a huge thing for a lot of devs, just to make sure everything's working right anytime they do a change. So I think it's really, really important. Now, you mentioned there all the data providers. How many different data providers are there in the Cardano ecosystem? Just asking out of curiosity.
So I think the most known data provider is Blockfrost. And then Maestro is entering the space as well. It's been used to power a lot of the apps behind Genius Yield, but now it's open to the public. But apart from that, there isn't that many other data providers. There is Demeter as well by TXPipe, which provides you to manage infrastructure and manage node, which is not exactly kind of like a API-based data provider. But it's you can think of like, building on Cardano as there are multiple. There's a stack of technologies that need to be integrated for things to work. At the top of the stack you have the smart contracts. Plutus, Icon, the on-chain code. And in the middle of the stack you have the off-chain code, which is Atlas or Lucid, and this is where you build transactions and you balance those coin selection UTXOs. And then lower, then you have the data providers, and these are what they do. These are data pipelines that connect to Cardano nodes and then do indexing. So, for example, IOG released the DB Sync, which is also a very popular kind of way of indexing data on chain, and then be able to query data that then can be used for Atlas or Lucid. And so it's by having all these three pieces together integrated, that's kind of your main building block of building an app. And it's actually been a big hurdle for the space to build everything internally. And for small projects with limited dev bandwidth, having to be able to offload some of those pieces of the stack to other frameworks or other libraries or services is a huge lift of their shoulder, where they can focus on application specific logic and not have to, like Lars said, reinvent the wheel and kind of re-implement those data pipelines or those Atlas library again and again when they could just use what's already available and kind of standardize across the space. And so this is why these key components play a key role, right, in really accelerating, and lowering the barrier to entry for development on Cardano.
Now, it's taken quite a while to get to this point, since smart contracts have launched to get this type of tooling out to the community. It's almost a year and a half, maybe a little bit longer now. Why has it taken so long to get to this point and have this type of tooling that obviously everyone needs to start building really good and complex dApps on Cardano?
I would say a primary reason for that is that a lot of things are just moving really fast and things are shifting around, with the hot forks and everything. And there really hasn't been a real consensus on what API you should use for a very long time. I think things are a little bit more stable now, but for a while, as I was working on all these different PABs and on-chain tools, off-chain tools, things were just constantly shifting around. Like our focus was constantly changing. So I asked this question to myself, many times in the past 1.5 years, that why is it taking so long to build like such basic things? But then I myself was working on the same thing, but on different projects, because from different viewpoints, because the consensus was just changing all the time. But I think now that things are a bit more stable, now that we finally have some tools, things are looking a lot better than they were like 1 year ago. Because 1 year ago, I had no hope. Like, what am I supposed to write?
Yeah, sorry, maybe I want to just add something. I don't know from my perspective, I don't know if it's too long if you consider that Cardano, the app development, is a completely new paradigm in blockchain. It's completely new. So I guess that's probably we suffer every day with that, in the community. When you have a new customer that wants to develop the app, we have there Ethereum and the EVM blockchain for a long time, many years. Cardano is pretty new. In that aspect, if you consider that it's a really novel technology, I don't know if 1.5 years is too much for having these kind of tools. In this, I'm really glad to see that things are being more mature now and you have alternatives. And for me, it's normal in an open source community when you have different ideas, and it's not trivial to combine all those ideas. For example, at this moment, even it's not clear standard of what is the architecture of a D app in Cardano. There are alternatives. So maybe now the challenge when we have these new tools is maybe I like that part, in my daily work, to classify, okay, you want to develop the app, you have this alternative. You want to do everything on backend, you want to do this on the front end, this on the backend. But for that, you need education too, because maybe you, even in the language you use, when we say smart contract, what is a smart contract in Cardano? And starting from that, you have something to work on, because people understand different things. Not all the people understand what is the on-chain and off-chain code. People say that, but maybe what we are talking about exactly, So maybe it's a combination of reasons of this apparently delay that for me is not a delay. Is the normal flow of things, the nature of this kind of technology,
Yeah, it certainly does take time, and I'm glad we got to this point. It's just when you look at other ecosystems, and you engage with a developer that is building a dApp, you engage with them, and they say, oh yeah, it should take us about 2 weeks to put that together. Not a problem. And they come back to you and go, oh, hang on, this is on Cardano. I didn't realize. I thought you wanted to build a Solidity dApp, and it's sorry, that 2 week timeline's gone to 8 months, 8, 9, 10 months a year. So it's a completely different experience. And for me, as someone watching the space, watching all these projects trying to build, it's been I think a little painful watching the amount of development that you guys have to go through just to get to this point, and then watching other ecosystems just fly off because they have been around for so much longer, and all this tooling and everything around there has been in the ecosystem for such a long time, and has been well tested. Still, they get hacked, but that's another thing. That's a totally different story.
Maybe I like to stress that this is a temporary state, right? We are maturing as an ecosystem, and like Manu said, we are introducing a new paradigm. And if you look at when the last time we introduced a new paradigm in blockchain was Ethereum. I went from Bitcoin to Ethereum, and Ethereum took 5 years until it had its DeFi summer. And in those 5 years, what happened is that people were doing what's happening right now in Cardano. They were building the frameworks, they were maturing the ecosystem, they were standardizing how to build EVM-based application. And then they had that DeFi summer that everyone remembers. And now it's very easy to build on EVMs. And then a lot of blockchains that are derived from the EVM, like Solana or Binance, then could just piggyback on all those standards and all the infrastructure and be able to launch very quickly. On Cardano, we introduced a new paradigm, and that means there is a bit of a buffer where we as builders and developers need some time to mature the ecosystem, but we only need to build the wheel once. Once the wheel is building, it's going to start spinning, and we're going to have our own DeFi summer coming to Cardano, and I think really soon, and it's going to be very exciting because when we choose a different paradigm, we also mean that we can offer different things, right? It's like the difference between a gas-powered car and an electric car, right? An electric car is not just a cooler car, it's a car that can do things that a gas-powered car cannot do, right? And that's what I'm really excited about Cardano is we're going to see applications and products coming on Cardano that are just won't be able to be found anywhere else, just on Cardano. We just need a bit more time to mature the space and kind of find those design patterns and really find our niche as an ecosystem, because that's really, I think, the best way to survive in a multi-chain environment is not just do more of the same but slightly faster, but to find really a clear competitive advantage that we think we can do better than anyone else, and really focus on that and have something of value to offer to the space that is different.
Very excited. I'm really happy to be here to experience the coming Cardano DeFi summer whenever that happens. Maybe next bull run. Fingers crossed. All right. So in terms of getting started with all this, is there documentation? Is there starter points, starter kits, anything like that? A lot of developers complain about the lack of documentation for many, many things. I'm hoping there's documentation.
Yes, there certainly is. What did you ask? Starter kits? Yes, there's also a starter kit. So there's an example project that references Atlas and then tries to do as many things as possible of those that I mentioned before. So of course, querying the blockchain and transaction construction, but also unit tests and these private testnet tests. So basically the whole palette available, and you can also use that as a starting point and basically remove the smart contracts and then use it as a starting point for your own project building on Atlas. And there are tutorials, and of course there's also documentation in the code, so also a HADOC documentation. I mean, it may be not completely completed because we also, I mean, software developers, or at least Haskellers, tend to be perfectionist. So we didn't want to wait until everything is perfect before we go open source. So at some point we just had to get out there. But I think, and I mean, it's certainly good enough, the documentation to get started.
All right, brilliant. I do have all the links and references, so I'll put them all in the show notes for everyone. Now, before we end off on this, is there anything else that anyone wants to add about the whole Atlas side of things?
Well, maybe you mentioned that it's an open source project, right? So we welcome contribution. We welcome people to use it. Open source software is like a living, breathing thing, and our goal was also to by making open source to have other people kind of contribute and maybe improve it over time and just make it better for everyone. So I think we just invite everyone to check out the repo, look at the example, try it out for yourself, and then if you feel like you have any suggestions or improvements, don't hesitate to provide a contribution.
Yeah, let's test it to hell and then break everything, and hopefully we can make it better. I know I'm gonna make MLabs do that.
Brilliant, awesome. Now I'm going to squeeze in one last cheeky question here. When's the Genius Yield platform launching?
When it's ready.
Come on, seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to do dates. We're doing a lot of integration. So I recently actually published a monthly update that should be coming out today or tomorrow. So I go in detail on like the latest development update across the entire stack and kind of give a couple of hints on when we may have like things coming out. So maybe I'll just refer to that video for like a full kind of rundown of the updates.
All right. Thanks, Marvin. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this episode. Chase, Manu, Ailes, Lars, and Marvin. It's been an absolute pleasure having you all on the podcast here to learn more about Atlas and everything that you guys have been building for the last, year or so in regards to this. So it's been brilliant to learn a little bit more and have this awesome tool for the Cardano ecosystem to start building more awesome dApps in the Cardano space.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, gotta do it like that. You've been listening to the Learn Cardano podcast. Gotta get it hype. Crypto is what we like, but this is not investment or financial advice. Gotta do your research, cause it's risky. We know it is. This show is educational and it's informative. Crypto's the future, really, it ain't no debating.